Welcome to Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie Valentine and the host of this podcast. I'm a physician, evidential psychic medium, international keynote speaker, and author of Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, an inspirational story about transformation, healing, and spirituality, available online at Amazon as well as other online platforms worldwide. The inspiration for this podcast came from my own life experiences. As I have journeyed through life, it has taught me that we're part of a greater divine web of interconnectedness. I have walked the path of illness, healing, and transformation. After two near death experiences, I became clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient, and was guided to attend medical school at the age of 54. We will be meeting with many different types of doctors, healers, as well as spiritual leaders, educators, and other inspiring souls in this podcast. It is my hope that you will gain information to help you create a path to healing your own life physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and bridge the gap between science and soul. To learn more about me or to work with me spiritually for ancestral healing, medical intuitive, or evidential psychic medium, as well as other forms of spiritual guidance, please visit divinespiritualessence.com. To work with me as a physician, please visit drlottie.com. Welcome to Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie, and today I am so honored to introduce Maureen Towns from Canada. She has a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, a Master of Arts in Leadership, and she is a relationship mentor with over 25 years of nursing experience in both public and private healthcare across Canada. After experiencing mental illness and addiction with her own children, she founded Maureen Towns Consulting to help families struggling to care for their own loved ones. Her work with parents inspires them to rediscover themselves within chaotic and challenging situations. She recently published a book called Broken Open, a mother's journey to survive her children's addiction and mental illness. Maureen shares her journey through her teenage kids' mental illnesses to help parents find freedom in chaos. Part memoir and part guide, Broken Open shows you how to empower your children to reclaim their lives without losing yourself in the process. After growing up in an abusive alcoholic home and raising her children through their mental health issues, Maureen discovered a more authentic way of living after learning resilience, detachment, self-care, and communication. In the years following her family's challenges, Maureen has camped on a beach in Thailand, slept under the stars on a remote Philippine island, sailed and snorkeled in the Andaman Sea, and became a dive master in Roatan and dove with sharks in the Red Sea. Born in Ontario, Maureen currently resides in Calgary, Alberta. She can most often be found hiking in the Rocky Mountains, doing CrossFit with her son Sam, biking with her son Ben and granddaughter Athena, or just hanging out with her daughters Sydney and Allie. Maureen also hosts her own podcast called Broken Open Podcast. To learn more, you can visit maureentowns.com. A warm welcome to you, Maureen. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today to share your journey and knowledge with all the listeners.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be your guest, and thank you very much for having me.
I can't wait to have you share your new book. It was just published, right, on January 12th?
It's right. It just came out last week.
Yep. So it's just hot off the press. Tell me what led you to write the book Broken Open, A Mother's Journey to Survive Her Children's Addiction and Mental Illness?
Well, I had a strong urge to put pen to paper to articulate what had happened and what I had learned from it. I think that the ability to find the right words and say things in the right way helped me in processing exactly, okay, sort of to cement the learning that I knew I'd experienced. and articulate the change that I'd gone through, as well as a real drive. This is what kept me writing, iteration after iteration after iteration. What kept me going was, it's the book I wish I'd had. And so I felt really called to write a book to help other people going through what I had been through. So this is the book I wish I'd been able to read when my kids were struggling.
Mm-hmm. And so tell me about your children. What happened to your own kids when they were teenagers?
Yeah, it's a long story, Dr. Lai. It really started, the crisis for us really started with our second son, Ben, when he was 18 and in his last year of high school. And what we started to see was he was losing weight and quite truant from school, and had lost interest in things that he found, very engaging before, lacked a sense of purpose. He was coming across as a very lazy kid, and that's not the Ben that I knew. The Ben as a kid, I mean, this kid was driven, active, gifted in sports, liked to achieve things. And so we noticed quite a difference in him. And what really, we sort of tried everything to get him motivated and, up out of bed and stop partying and get to work and do something with some direction, and nothing seemed to work. And so what we did is ask him to leave home. And what we thought was going to happen from that was that he was going to then suddenly realize, wake up about 3 days later, we thought, and realize that it's a cold, hard world out there, and the support that we'd been offering was really great, and that he should probably come back and take advantage of that, so that he could support himself in some sort of life with direction. That didn't happen. What happened was he drifted further and further away. He looked worse and worse and worse quite quickly, and we started to realize that we were losing him. And that was the beginning of the beginning for us. It was like, okay, something's really not right here. He is not thriving. I'm scared to death. I'm scared he's going to die living in this van in winter in Alberta. He's going to vomit. He's going to aspirate. He's going to get beat up. He's going to get attacked. He's going to get hit by a truck. I don't know what's going to happen, but something terrible is coming. And so we conducted an intervention and sent him off to his first treatment center. From there, I mean, honestly, it was just, incident after incident with 3 of our 4 kids. I mean, then one of our, our youngest daughter started to self-harm, and we started seeking treatment. Then Ben came home and relapsed. Then Sam, our oldest, came home from university and had a psychotic break and couldn't return to school. And it just went on and on and on. And that's sort of what the book chronicles, is this journey that we had, of chaos in our home, and our frantic struggle to try and figure out what to do and how to help them, and what I learned from that. So that's sort of what happened with our kids. I mean, there was an awful lot over the course of years.
Yeah. For the listeners that recognize this story and may have family members that are going through the same scenario, what advice do you have to them? How can they find the right therapy or treatment for their loved ones?
It's a good question. I think there's a number of things that I wish I'd done differently. One was really stop it and do your homework a little bit. Like we rushed into our first experience with a treatment center. We ended up sending Ben to a treatment center across the country that, it's sort of unbelievable when you read the story of this. This treatment center was ended up being shut down about a week before he was finished treatment, and the clients were just sort of dispersed. I mean, it really, really was chaotic and quite scary. And I ended up flying across the country to sort of rescue him. So, and we made the decision to send him there in a bit of a rush and out of fear. And we ignored the little tingling, something doesn't feel right here. When we were talking with the with the administrator of this treatment center, and we were so frantic and fearful. And I don't think anyone makes good decisions in that state of mind. So first thing I would say is slow down a little bit and do a little bit of research. And I understand that you're fearful and scared. Don't ignore those little signs or those questions that you might have. The second, and there's a list of tips actually in finding a good treatment center and a good therapist in the book. But the other thing I would highly recommend is to find someone who's been through what you've been through, who understands what you're experiencing and has come out the other side. I think that finding someone who understands what you're talking about, more than just studying it in school, like someone who's really been through it, is pretty important. And there's an awful lot of us out there. I mean, everybody knows somebody, so reach out to someone that you trust, because they'll probably be able to put you in touch with someone else who's been there, done that, and ask a lot of questions. What did you do? What worked? What didn't work? What would you recommend? So find someone who's been through it and who has maybe what you want, and take advantage of that. So
Did
those
all
are the two
your
biggies.
did all your children end up in treatment centers, or just the oldest?
No, our oldest boys went through treatment. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and then my third child, I call her the lost child. I mean, she's the one that didn't ask for anything. She went to her room and stayed quiet, and still hasn't asked for anything. I mean, this kid, this is one of my biggest regrets, is assuming that she was okay through this. I was just honestly, and I say this with lots of humility, I was so grateful, honestly, that she wasn't trying to kill herself, and that she was in her room and I knew where she was, and just, would peek in the door and say goodnight and go to bed. And she wasn't doing well either. She needed support. She needed to be able to ask for help. And she didn't feel like there was room for that in our house, because there was so much other stuff going on that she felt was more critical than what she needed. So she's never asked for a thing, actually. And my youngest daughter, she's not an addict. What she was experiencing was related to the traits of borderline personality disorder and lots of self-harm. And so she went to treatment, and still does, actually, for dialectic behavioral therapy, and is absolutely, I mean, I swear to God, she could teach this stuff now. She's so good at it, and articulate and excellent. So she was never in drug and alcohol treatment, but she has done a lot of treatment for borderline. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds like you really have been through a lot. I mean, all the children going through various therapies. I know in your book you talk about codependent parenting tendencies. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So codependence is really about the idea that I don't know how to separate how I'm doing from how someone else is doing. Codependent is I'm and as a mom, a codependent mother, if you'll know one when you see one, because when you say, how are you doing? What they'll do is tell you about their kids, and usually the sickest kid, right? And so you're never doing very well. You're only as well as your sickest child, or and I mean, our society, this is one of the beefs I have, really sort of encourages this kind of, selfless, throw yourself under the bus mothering. And so mothers in particular are quite codependent. I mean, we're natural caregivers, and are quite invested in how our kids are doing. So that's great. I see this everywhere, and it works well until your kids are really sick. And now, if you're codependent with your kids who are very, very unwell or atypical, chances are you're very, very unwell. And that's when it becomes quite an issue. And so when I talk about breaking the cycle of codependence, I talk about being able to get off what I call the roller coaster with that your kids may be on, right? Being very maybe dysregulated or in and out of addiction or whatever they're experiencing. You get to support them and love them, but you don't have to ride that roller coaster with them. Every time they're down, you don't have to bottom out, etc. So that's the gist of codependent parenting.
That's a very good advice, because it's easy for a parent to fall into that trap,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're trying to do the best for their child, and
right.
they're sort of suffering with the child instead of finding their own, grounding themselves and finding that peace within themselves, which is hard because you have to step away and kind of look more objectively at the situation as a whole.
You do. And you have to. I remember the first time I heard the term detach with love, and I couldn't figure this term out. Like, what does that even mean? That sounds like conditional love. Like, that just sounded like detaching and loving sounded like opposites to me.
Right.
I couldn't figure out, like,
Yeah.
and so it really, I've got it figured out now, and it's awesome because I love my kids. Man, I love my kids. I love them, and I still want the best for them, and I'm their biggest cheerleader, and I'm absolutely here to support them in whatever they're trying to achieve. But when they're not doing well, I am doing well.
Right.
And that's the freedom, when you learn how to break the codependent cycle, is that it doesn't mean you're never going to have pain. It doesn't mean you're never going to have unpleasant emotions associated with kids who are struggling. That's not what I mean by the ability to detach or breaking the codependent cycle. I just mean you get to choose. You actually get to choose how you're going to look after yourself, and how you're going to spend your energy, and what you're going to do with yourself. And at first it feels, I know a lot of parents feel quite guilty, like it's almost like it's not okay to be okay when someone you love isn't okay.
Right.
It actually is. It is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually really, really important
Mm-hmm.
that you learn how to do this.
Yeah, and I know you talk about the validation is key to stronger relationships with your children, and how to build better trust.
Yes. And so this was it sounds so simple, but it was such a revelation to me, learning how to effectively validate my kids. What I used to do, I'll go back to how things used to be. I mean, for example, my daughter would come home from school, in junior high, and she'd be struggling, and she'd plop down on the sofa, and she'd say, "No, nobody loves me, nobody likes me, I have no friends." And rather than say something validating, like, that sounds really lonely, or, boy, if I didn't think I had any friends, I think I'd feel really lonely, something like that, I would say, "Sure you do. Sure you have friends. Allie, don't you remember the birthday party you got invited to last week or last month?" And I'd argue the story rather than validate or acknowledge the feelings behind the story. And what I thought I was doing was teaching her to check the facts, and, you know, toughen up and bounce back. But really, what I was doing was dismissing the feelings that she was trying to express. And what that does is it just sort of shuts people down, and they drift apart because they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, because they're not being seen and heard. Really, I mean,
Right.
I'm stuck on the
Right.
story, the facts of the story, and I want to argue that rather than listening to her,
Yes.
empathetically, and saying, "Man, I don't have to say, yeah, you're right, you have no friends, that sucks," because that's not true. What I do need to do, though, is say, "That sounds lonely," and acknowledge the feeling. And then what I find is then she'll say, "Yeah, it's really lonely." And then we can talk more. Like, you have to, and I mean, this is particularly important with people who are unwell, but really actually important for everyone. I mean, it's a skill that I use probably in just about every conversation. Is that sounds tough, hard, like acknowledging that I'm seeing, hearing, and with you in what you're
Yeah.
experiencing.
Absolutely. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to fall into that trap as a parent because we don't like to see our children suffer. And so we try to find the positive. Of course, like you just said, of course you have friends, or don't you remember this?
Yes.
Right. But it's very true that they're not being heard. All they wanted was to be recognized for the feelings that they have. So
Yeah.
it's such an important point that you bring up the validation.
Yeah. I mean, she's a kid and she's had a crappy day. And she doesn't
Yeah.
yet know how to come home and say, man, I just feel alone and tired. Can you just hug me? I mean,
Right.
that would be great if she could have said that. I could have said, "Oh, okay." But what she says is, "I have no friends," right? She's trying to create,
Mm.
and we all do this, right? I have a feeling, and now I need to create a story to justify it. Now I'm going to tell the story, and rather than hear that story, other people want to argue it, and it's just a recipe for disconnection, really.
Hmm. So
Mm-hmm.
important to just listen, because many times I think children and especially teenagers, they're not really going to say, "Oh, I just want a hug, mom," because
Yeah,
they're
no, they
trying to
don't.
they're really trying to break away from you and try to show that they're a big kid now and don't need you anymore, right?
Right. And I mean, yeah,
So
for sure teenagers are like that, but I mean, I still have to work at this. Like just ask for what you need and don't feel like you need to create a story or emphasize points of a story to justify a feeling. A feeling's justified all on its own. It's okay to just feel what you're feeling. You don't
mhm.
need to back it up with facts. It's just
Right.
is. And what do I need right now? What do I need to do? This is a skill that we just don't teach, and I'm still learning it too. And yeah, I'm not surprised that teenagers can't come home and just say, "Man, I'm lonely. I could really use a hug." Like I'm
Yeah.
not that doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah.
um can you talk a bit about compassionate boundaries to honor your emotional and physical health, not your kids' behavior?
Yeah, what that means is when I was first learning about boundaries, I had trouble defining what they were, and what they seemed like to me, what they were presented as is really rules. I mean, really, early on, we were encouraged to make rules, and we called them boundaries. And the rules were meant to um, affect another person's behavior, right? And this is where it gets really muddy for people. A rule is a rule. A boundary is more about you, what's good for you. It has nothing to do with trying to get a person to do or not to do something. It's really about, what do you need, and asking for it. And so compassionate boundaries really are, go easy on yourself. It's okay to need space. It's okay to not want to have Christmas with someone who's going to destroy the day. Do you know what I mean? Like and so, the way I define a boundaries are very individual. And so this is part of the coaching involved is there's no right or wrong here. You get to decide what's healthy for you, and you get to ask for that. And boundaries can change. Um, it's okay to shift that line. And the way I define the boundary again is the distance between you and I that I need so that I can love myself as much as I love you. Right? So this
Very
isn't a
wise words.
yeah, I didn't come up with it. I wish I did. I stole it from someone who stole it from someone who stole it from someone. But I really for example, and how a boundary plays out is it, it's important for me that my house is peaceful, that um, and so I don't live with people who are using. I don't live with people who are dysregulated. I don't live with people with whom I feel like I need to walk on eggshells so that they don't blow up. I live with people who I actually live alone with a dog right now, but I would I'm careful about my home. My home is a refuge, and it needs to be a healthy environment, a place where I can be and feel and recharge, in that way. Um, but I also really, it's very important to me to have a relationship with my kids, whether they're well and using or not using, and so I will find a way to spend time with them, and in a frequency that feels healthy for me, that I'm not obsessing over what are they doing, are they healthy, are they using, am I checking their pupils. I make sure that can I do this and be healthy? Can I do this? And if it takes something out of me, how am I going to recharge? How can I be with this person from a place of love and encouragement, and a place of love and encouragement from me? So that's what a boundary is. And there's a story that I heard back when we were first looking at treatment, and it was about this woman whose son, was living in Vancouver in a really rough neighborhood, and was using and was living on the street. And every week she would go and take him a coffee. Right? She would take him a coffee, and sometimes he would be able to have the coffee and sit up and drink it and have a conversation with her. And sometimes he would be just passed out and she would just leave the coffee. But every time she would touch his shoulder and say, I love you. And I'm here for you when you're ready. And that to me that epitomizes, she didn't scoop him up and take him home and organize his life and put him, force him into treatment and, push him into anything. She just knew, and she didn't let him use in her home. She didn't get him an apartment so that he could use there. She knew that what was healthy for her was to go once a week, right? Make sure that he knew he was loved by his mom, and that she was there for him when he was ready. I'd give him a coffee. And I'm like, that is pretty special. And the story goes, this is a true story. This guy eventually did ask for help and get it. And I think he does drug counseling now.
Wow, what an amazing story.
Yeah, it is. And I think that is the epitome of detachment with love and, effective boundary setting. She knew what she could do was be to offer him help when he's ready to get it, not coerce, manipulate, bribe, nothing. She just accepted him as he was and offered to be there when he wanted something different. That's amazing. That's a goal.
Yeah, really an amazing story. You mentioned, what about people who walk on eggshells in their own house, and they're listening to this and they're wondering, well, how do I set the boundaries? How do I, if I do this one thing wrong, this person is going to blow up. Where do they start?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they start by sitting down and reflecting on, what does a healthy home look like for them? What do they need to be healthy? And if by chance they need that person gone, or that person to change their behavior, I would coach them on how to have that conversation. And, I had a call with someone this past week, and she said, I'm afraid to ask, my son to leave home because I'm afraid he'll hurt himself. I'm afraid he'll go and he'll kill himself if I tell him he needs to go. He's very fragile. He's very vulnerable. And I completely relate to that. And I said, well, you actually don't ask him to leave. What you do is you tell him what he needs to do in order to stay. So think about what you need to have a healthy home. And then you have that conversation. This is what a healthy home looks like for me, right? And so that's what living here means. Then, if he decides that that's not what he wants, it's his decision. You're acknowledging that he's making a choice. You're not doing anything to him, you're doing things for you. Now, if then by chance, he doesn't know what to do, right? He doesn't, he knows he needs help and he doesn't know how to get it. Well, then now we're talking about that's part of that conversation. So, in order to live in a healthy home, this is what I need. And part of that is, as a first step, I'll support you in getting this kind of help at this place. And here's how that could look. To live here, maybe that's part of the deal. I don't know. But that's kind of the coaching we go to.
No, that's very good advice. So that people have some kind of an idea, what does that look like? Where do you begin, right? Mm-hmm. And then they can always contact you for some guidance.
Absolutely, they can. I mean, a consult is free with me, and I'm not the right person for this person. I mean, this kid might need an intervention, and so I put this person in touch with an interventionist who's awesome. And this is the way she does it. So this is what I love. So basically, what she'll, because most people will say, look, if you're planning an intervention, I'm not going to be there. I'm leaving. I was like, okay. So the way that she frames the intervention up is she'll say, we're going to get together, the family and me, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about you. And we really love it if you'd be there. Now, I don't know a lot of people that wouldn't show up for that meeting. I could see not wanting to be there, but I would probably show. I'd be like, okay, I don't they're going to be sitting around talking about me. I want to hear what they're going to say. So, and so there's no secrecy, there's no deviant, there's no lying. It's just, this is the conversation we're going to have, and it'd be great if you'd be there. Man, most people are going to show up for that. I love that.
Yeah. No, that's a great way.
Yeah.
I know also in the book, you talk about some self-care strategies and to prioritize your own emotions, manage anxiety, and parent with clarity. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice or strategies that you can share?
Yeah. Again, it's pretty individual what self-care means. I used to think pre-kids getting sick, I used to think that self-care had a lot to do with an expensive haircut and maybe a nice manicure. And, that seemed like, when you see someone, you're like, that person takes care of themselves. That seemed like self-care to me, but it has nothing to do with that for me now. Now, self-care has to do with creating the space each day for me to do something that I can lose myself in. And I'm not talking about playing Sudoku while you're watching Netflix. I'm talking about, you're enjoying it so much that time passes and you don't know where the time went. That kind of flow that you can get into, whether that's meditating, reading a book that you love, going for a walk in nature, spending time with your family, spending time with your pets. I don't know what it is. It's different for everyone. Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's playing the drums. I don't know. But finding that thing that you can just be, honestly, that you lose track of time, and that's joy. You're so immersed in what you're doing that you're not on that hamster wheel of, I can't believe this happened and this, in the past or in the future, right? Regret about the past, shoulda, coulda, woulda, fear about the future, right? That's where a lot of us, especially when we're living with someone who's not well, spend our time, right? Mm-hmm. Past, future, past, future, past, future. Right. And it's just about really getting present and, like I say, losing yourself in the joy of something.
That's great advice. Something that everybody needs to do, whether they have a stable situation at home or not. It's good advice because everybody needs to center themselves and just find themselves, find that time for themselves, just enjoying something. So important.
It is, and it's hard to do when you haven't done it for a long time, which people probably haven't when they're, living with
Hmm.
someone. I remember the first time someone said to me, "What do you do for fun?" And I'm like, fun, 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 fun. What's fun? Like I remember having it. I know I've been there before, but I can't for the life of me figure out what is that thing. So it was a bit of it was like homework. I had to keep trying things until I could find something that was fun. So yeah, needs some
Yeah,
encouragement to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
important. I think part of it is just people have free time and they end up surfing on their phone, looking on Facebook, reading the news for the 14th time that day.
Yes. Yes.
Instead of putting away the computer and technology and just doing something, going outside. Could be watching the birds or learning how to draw and anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I love personally watching dogs have a good time like that because dogs are so in the moment. Like watching dogs play or children play who are just right in the moment helps
Mhm.
to put me in the moment too. So
Right. It's
that's what I
such
do.
good advice. We have Labradoodles, and I love going outside. And I take little breaks throughout my day, and I go outside, even if it's only for 15 minutes. And I
Yeah.
throw the ball, and dogs run, and it totally grounds you and makes you forget about the pile of work that's sitting on your desk, and it puts you in that moment. And it's so
It's true.
important for people to find things like that. And people who don't have dogs, they can just step outside and listen to the birds for 15
Yeah.
minutes,
Yeah.
or go
Get
for
in
a
the
walk
sun.
around the
Yes.
block, and just get away from desks and computers and gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a pleasure. We're running out of time. So I loved having you on the show today. But before we end, I want you to tell the listeners how they can find you and work with you and find you on the different social media platforms as well. So what is your website again?
It's very simple. It's MaureenTowns.com. So it's my name.com. And on the website, there's multiple spots where you can just, with one click, you're into my calendar and you can book a free consult. And I'll talk to anyone. Honestly, my mission is to just be helpful and be of service. And um, I do offer programs, but I would probably say half the people that I talk to, I refer on to something else. I'll always offer something, whether it's my program or something else helpful that people can take away. And my social media, my Instagram is Maureen Towns, pretty straightforward. My Facebook is Maureen Towns Consulting, straightforward. I'm not hard to find, and those links are also on my website, as is the link to buy the book if you're interested. And I hope people take advantage of this book. I mean, it really is the book I wish I'd had. And what I'm most proud of with the book is that I offered the kids the opportunity to author a chapter, and they all took me up on it. And so at the end of the book, you'll see, and I said, just write whatever you want the reader to know. That it's pretty open, and so they've each written something from their perspective, and I think that is pretty darn special. And I've heard from other people that that is pretty darn cool, and it came from the idea. Sorry, I know I'm rambling on.
That's
trying to wrap
okay.
trying to wrap this up.
That's all right.
Uh, the idea came from when we were in treatment. We were in a family treatment program, the effective treatment program that we were in here in Calgary. It was the staff. A lot of the staff of the program were graduates of the program, and when they spoke up and they told, offered their perspective or what it was like from their point of view, I sat up a little straighter and I listened hard, and it was invaluable insight into, you know, what goes on in the brain of someone who's not well. Because, I was always, scratching my head saying, it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't. And you can't apply logic uh, to emotional dysregulation.
Right.
You just
No.
can't.
Yes.
So I really wanted the kids to have a say, and
Mhm.
I'm so proud that they did that, and what they have in there, I think, is helpful. So that's what I'm most proud about the book.
That's just wonderful. And is your book available worldwide or just the United States and Canada?
It's available, I think, worldwide. I mean, it's on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com. So I think you can have it shipped just about
Right.
anywhere.
And
I
you
don't know. Do
also
you know that?
there's also a digital version, right? So
There
if it's on
sure is. You can
Amazon, it
download it.
should be
Yeah.
worldwide for the
Yeah,
listeners in Australia, New Zealand, and India and Europe.
absolutely. Yeah.
They
It's
can
not in
always
other
get it.
languages yet.
Right, but they can always get it on the Kindle version, so they can always just download the book if they go to Amazon.com.
Absolutely. And thank you for
And
that.
the book again is called Broken Open: A Mother's Journey to Survive Her Children's Addiction and Mental Illness.
Yes.
So thank you again so much, Maureen, for coming on the podcast today. I really enjoyed having you as a guest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lottie. It's been my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Dr. Lottie Science with Soul. Make sure you are subscribed so you will be notified of new episodes as they become available. To work with me spiritually for ancestral healing, medical intuitive, or evidential psychic medium, as well as other forms of spiritual guidance, please visit divinespiritualessence.com. To work with me as a physician, please visit drlottie.com. My book, Med School After Menopause: The Journey of My Soul, an inspirational story about transformation, healing, and spirituality, is available online at Amazon as well as other online platforms worldwide.